So there are 10 things I wish every new nurse knew. And in this video, I'm going to share with you what those 10 things are. If you don't know who I am, my name's Thomas. I am a nurse over at nursemoneytalk.com. And that site, and along with this YouTube channel, is geared towards nurses and nursing students talking about nursing school, careers, nurse life, personal finance, the whole 9 yards. So if you find any of that interesting, make sure to hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. So let's go ahead and get started with the first thing every new nurse should know, which is that you're not going to know everything whenever you come out of nursing school, and that it's okay, and that's okay. So I've already made a video previously that just talked about a little bit about imposter syndrome and how like new nurses, whenever they come out, they will have this sense and feeling that, oh, they don't know everything and there's something's gonna happen and all this other stuff. And the truth of the matter is that, well, first of all, things are generally not as bad as they seem. And the other thing is that you're not going to know everything. And you know what? Even your experienced nurses, you're going to see that they don't know everything either. The main thing you just have to be aware of or have the mindset for is that you're constantly going to be learning. That's going to be throughout your entire career. And to be receptive of when you're being told something, know who you need to know who is a great resource to ask questions to, and be receptive to whenever that information, whenever somebody's trying to tell you something or teach you something. Not saying you necessarily have to listen to them, or even saying that the person who's going to be trying to tell you something is going to be right all the time. But for you being new and for the purposes of learning, you should be receptive to at least hearing what that person is saying and then going from there. The next thing that you need to be aware of is that mistakes are going to happen. It just is going to happen. That's just the fact of life when you have imperfect beings, people, whatever, doing things. And especially when emotions involved, stress, and all this other stuff gets into play, you're going to make mistakes. What you need to be aware of, though, is to know what your protocol is for certain mistakes, if you will. So, for instance, like it's likely that you will at some point probably miss giving a patient a dose, or you know, a patient's going to get the wrong medication. That is a possible. You need to be aware of what are the steps you need to do for when situations like that happen. The other thing you need to be aware of is to try to do things that are going to minimize mistakes from happening. So in other words, I get it that you're going to be put in very uncomfortable situations in some of these facilities you're going to be working in. But the thing that you need to know, like what shortcuts you can't take and so on and so forth, to try to help minimize mistakes. The third thing is you need to prioritize your self-care. And I get it, as nurses, a lot of us are just kind of built like we need to serve, we need to keep serving. And even to the detriment of our own selves, we just still keep serving. The truth of the matter is that if you're, I've heard this analogy said before, that how can you keep pouring out onto others if you yourself, if you're not filled? You see what I'm saying? Like if you are not energized, if you are not taking care of yourself and attending to your needs, how are you then going to be in a situation where you can take care of others? That's going to be pretty hard to do. And so that might involve maybe you minimize the number of shifts that you're picking up. Maybe even as your manager or whoever keeps calling you, trying to push you to keep taking on shifts over and over and over, even after you've worked like your third, fourth, or fifth straight day in a row, that you know where you need to draw that line. Prioritizing your self-care might even mean that Maybe you figure out a way to schedule in working out, exercising, going for a run, eating healthy. That might even mean that you consider going and talking to a therapist. This is if you have anything going on in your own personal lives, or even for some of you guys that work in a very high acuity place, you know. So I'm thinking about my ER nurses, I'm thinking about my ICU nurses, even my mental health nurses who, whether it's some emotional, physical, whatever that's going on, that can really start wearing you down mentally, that you go and you seek somebody that to talk to. And the thing is that you don't even have to necessarily schedule in, like to go in for an office. You can go and schedule in. There's like online therapy places that you can go in, connect with a therapist there, and this could be on your phone. This could be on your laptop, your desktop at home, or whatever. They can schedule it around what works best for you. You can check that out by going to nursemoneytalk.com/online therapy. Link to that will also be in the descriptions below. The next thing that new nurses need to get a handle on is that time management is very important. It is very, very important. And I think it gets said in nursing school, but I feel like it's emphasized in some ways, but not emphasized in other ways. Like, I know when people mention about time management, they usually tend to bring up about MedSurge and how that is the place to get your skills down in terms of time management and all this other stuff. And I've already said this in plenty of other videos about how much I think that's crap that they say that you have to start in MedSurge. But looking specifically at that time management, the thing that I usually don't like about when MedSurge gets brought up is that people make it seem like that MedSurge is the only place that time management is important, and that is just not true. Pretty much every nursing specialty you're going to work in is going to require some kind of time management. Pretty much all of them. Time management is going to be important. If you are doing case management, right, you're dealing with papers, you're going to have deadlines, you're going to have this and that. You know, you might have to be dealing with finding a placement for a patient before they get discharged. Oh, wait, you have multiple patients and phone calls you're doing, while at the same time you have to get all of that placed by the time the patient is set to discharge, because this is the amount, only the set amount of days that insurance will cover, and they have to be out by that set period of time. You kind of see what I'm saying? I used case management as an example, but or nursing case management, I should say, because I feel like to kind of help shift this mindset that there's only certain areas where time management is important, when in fact time management is important for every area of nursing. And so what I would encourage you to do is, when you start going through your orientation, or even if you're off orientation while you're watching this, is look at what your preceptor was doing in terms of how they were managing their time, what was working for them, what was not working for them, how can you make that work with your flow. And by flow, what I mean is just like how you normally or naturally just want to, do things. And then also I would encourage you, ask some of your senior nurses who have been working on that unit or department that you're starting in. Like, you can also ask other nurses who work in other areas or other specialties. I'm not saying that there's not going to be any value that you get from that. I think you can get a lot of value in that. But the reason why I specifically mention the area you work in is that there's, in every department, even within the same specialties, flow tends to be a little different. This could just be either because of your particular facility wants certain things done, or certain things documented a certain way that another facility doesn't want, or maybe it's like how the doctor's round or something. There's usually some things that's typically unique amongst departments. And so dealing with somebody who works in or talking to a senior nurse who works in your department can really help you in terms of really finding out what are they doing in terms of time management and how are they making that work within your department. Because here's the thing, if nothing else, even if you don't learn what you can do, I'm hoping that you at least learn what you should not do, if you get what I'm saying. The fifth thing I think new nurses really should know is that, as the saying goes, teamwork makes the dream work. That is a very cliche saying that is said repeatedly. I'm sure you've heard it many times before. Here's the thing, in healthcare and especially working as a nurse, that is 100% true. More times than not, nurses end up being kind of like the glue that holds everything together in terms of like being almost like the connecting point between all the multidisciplinary like specialties that are going to be dealing with a patient. So a given patient might have, you might have the primary attending physician or hospitalist or whatever, and then you might have, maybe they've been referred out to cardiology or neuro I should say, or just kind of whatever, but whatever specialty group is looking after them. And then you're looking at like your maybe they have a registered dietitian consult, maybe they have a PT consult, maybe they have an OT consult. I mean, there's so many different disciplines that comes together to take care of a patient. And a lot of times, you know, they're looking at the nurse, since we are generally the ones who are with the patient, and nursing staff is typically with the patient around the clock if you're looking at a patient that's like in an inpatient setting. And so they're looking at us to almost kind of help orchestrate the thing. I'm not sure nobody ever really says it like that, but if you look at how things function, that's really what I tend to see that plays out more times than not. You could say, well, this is, you know, it's documented like in the computer. Aren't they all just looking through the notes? Some do, but if you are seeing a lot of people, you will find out that a lot of times they'll just come up, they'll ask the nurse for information, and then they'll just leave. And so you're gonna have to figure out and start learning how to work with all these different departments and all these different like discipline, you know, the multi-disciplines that are gonna come together to take care of a patient. The next one is to learn to develop a support network. And this can mean just about a lot of things, right? So when I say this, I immediately think to myself, are you building relationships with your coworkers? Because what you'll see in a lot of these departments, for a lot of days, it's gonna take a village. Like, and things are gonna go wrong, things are gonna get hectic. People, you know, you're gonna be working together with other nurses to help take care of patients, even if it's not quote unquote your assigned patient. But that's just what you do, you know. You're gonna go help out whoever because you hope that when you need help, and you will, I can promise you, you will at some point, that they will then come and help you out. This could also mean, going back to what I mentioned before about the nursemoneytalk.com/online therapy, a therapist could be a good support network for you. If you are going through, either personally going through different difficulty challenges, or even like from your professional standpoint, whether a lot of times related to either like patients passing away and whatnot, and the weight that can kind of put on you, going in and talking to somebody to help kind of almost take those burdens off your shoulders can become very important. For some of you, it could be it could be like a personal trainer. It could very well be like if physical health, your physical well-being is important to you, and you don't work out well without a personal trainer. That could very well be the thing that you're one of the people, if you will, that's pivotal to your support network. Either way, you need to figure out who's going to be your support network and start doing what you need to do to kind of put that all together. Next one, you are never going to stop learning. I know that you're probably thinking to yourself, I just finished school. What does he mean I'm never going to stop learning? I'm not even talking about formal education. You might never go back to, if you were in an ADN program to get your BSN, or if you're in a BSN to get like your master's or doctorate or whatever, you might never go back to get those things. But you are still going to be learning. Healthcare is changing, and it is changing quickly as technology advances. Some of the things that I have seen in the last couple years have been mind blowing in terms of what we are able to do now. And it makes me just really honestly excited for what the future holds. But as somebody who works in healthcare, as excited as I am for those things, primarily for me, God forbid if I needed to be a patient or whatever, knowing that that stuff is out there. But there's that. But the thing is, for me as a healthcare provider, makes me aware that there's a lot that's going to be happening, and I need to be on my A game in terms of trying to keep up with what's going on. And honestly, I'm not even talking about like, maybe some of y'all, you might be in a state where you have to do continuing education or whatnot, like as part, like you just have to do that as part of like keeping your license up. And I'm not even talking so much about that, but that don't get me wrong, that could be a huge part of it. But what I also think about is the situation where like you get the reps that come in and they're doing teaching over X, Y, and Z. Now, they're salespeople. We know that they're over there selling stuff, right? And really, in the grand scheme of things, nursing doesn't typically have much to do in terms of, whether or not like the facility or whoever's gonna buy whatever crap they're trying to sell. But what I do think is that make sure when you go in for those things that you don't just sign on just so you can get your free whatever and leave, that you try to at least listen and see where is tech at? What is the new, or healthcare tech, I should say, what is the thing that's coming down the pipeline? Because I'm not saying you're going to learn a lot of things from most sales reps that come in there, because I actually think that you probably won't. But I do think that there are a few of them that will show up that I do think that can actually tell you a lot of things or do a lot of education in terms of where healthcare is going. Just use that as an example. And lastly, actually, before I move on to the next one, if you I add the never stop learning, because when you look at evidence-based practice and where it's at, you want to be moving with where the evidence-based practice is at, right? Like you don't want to be the nurse that evidence-based practice from however many years now has said you need to wear gloves, XYZ, and all this other stuff, and you're still the one that's just not doing. Nope, not doing it. Hasn't worked. I mean, I've been doing this for this long. That's just how I've always done it. That's how I'm always going to keep doing it. That is not the right mentality you want to have. My next point is to remember that you need to be an advocate for your patient, and you are an advocate for your patient. And what that means is exactly what it means. Honestly, you're going to be an advocate for your patient. You're going to be looking out for the best interest of your patient, even in the midst of inpatient doctors. For example, a patient's about to go for a procedure, they signed a consent, but you look at them, you're talking to them, and it is obvious that this patient does not understand what the heck is about to go on. That is where you need to be an advocate for that patient. You need to go out and you need to make sure that the patient fully understands what they're about to get themselves into before they do it. This could, and obviously I'm talking about a patient who's sound mind or whatever. But even if you have a patient who is not, who's not oriented to what's going on, you need to figure out, is this an emergency thing that they just signed a consent for? Because if it's not an emergency thing based on what your facility's kind of protocol is, then that patient, can they actually sign off for a procedure when they're not lucid, when they're not fully oriented to what's going on? That's part of being a patient advocate. Next point is to embrace feedback. I get it that in a lot of ways, like criticism or critique, really, I'm going to say critique, that a lot of times it doesn't kind of feel good. Even if we know the person's well meaning and they say it kind of like a nice way, you're always just kind of like, I don't like being wrong and all the other stuff. And I get that. But you need to be in the mindset that I'm okay being wrong as long as I am doing the right thing, right? You need to be in pursuit of doing the right thing, not necessarily being right. If that kind of makes sense, right? And and here's the thing: you're going to work with a lot of jerks, right? You're going to work with the people who will say like, man, I'm just not, like I'm just blunt. Like it's not my fault. People think that I'm mean, that I'm just being honest. No, no, no. You're just a jerk. That's what that typically means. You can be blunt, direct, and honest without hurting people's feelings. That's just a fact. You can do that. There are ways to go about that and try to minimize the impact you can do on somebody's feelings. And I say that to bring to this point that you are going to have people like that who are complete jerks. And you're not going to like them. They're going to criticize you, but I don't want you to completely tune them out. I'm not saying you have to like them. I'm not saying you have to hang out with them. I'm not saying you have to go and seek their advice for anything. They'll probably usually just tell you their unsolicited advice anyway, but don't completely tune them out, because even though they're being complete jerks about it, you need to try to separate your emotions and try to peel out some truth in what they're saying. And I know that's going to be hard, but some of the changes I have made in my life that has helped me out, even when it comes to making, doing some of the stuff that I do online and whatnot, has some of the positive changes I've made has come from the harshest critic, right? And so, and even once I get a chance to separate their emotions, right? After, if it's on social media, after I block them, honest, like truth being told, and I kind of separate the emotions, and I'm just kind of like thinking about what they said. What I want to do is I want to see if I can peel out any bit of honesty from it, anything that I can actually learn from. Because And this is gonna sound like might be frustrating for some people to hear, even though they were being jerks about it, even though they were being very unpleasant, hateful, or whatever word you want to use about it. That does not necessarily mean that the main point of their comment is not true. And so, with that, you can deal with the person however you need to based on the particular situation, facility protocol, and what all had actually happened there. But take their comment and try to make tweaks from it, right? Because one thing I do think about is that even though they were being jerks, the thing I found out is that sometimes you can actually have an issue or problem that needs to be addressed. And the people who you consider nice are the ones who apparently were either too nice or didn't care enough or whatever the case might be to not be honest with you about a particular situation. So keep that in mind. My last point, and this is number 10, but before I get into that, I do want to make a quick note that that if you are just starting out as a new nurse, which you probably are, and that's why you're watching this, to check out the New Nurse Academy by going to nursemoneytalk.com/New Nurse Academy. Link will also be in the descriptions below. It's a program that pretty much starts off where nursing school left off, and it's about transitioning you into being licensed nurses. So they'll cover things in more detail, such as like, how to chart, the legalities of charting and stuff like that, that nursing school really doesn't get into. That's nursemoneytalk.com/New Nurse Academy. Like I said, link is in the descriptions below. Number 10, and my last point, is to remember to stay true to your values. It's going to be hard. Nursing's hard. Like, nursing is not glamorous, regardless of whatever TV or whatever movie or whatever's been, you might have been told. It is not glamorous. It's a dirty job. It's, at a lot of times, it's an underappreciated job. But I do want you to try to remember and hold on to your values and remember why you became a nurse in the first place. And that could be for any number of reasons. It could be because you wanted to help people. That's legitimate. That's fine. It could also just be because you wanted a stable job that makes a decent living. That is also very legitimate. And in either scenarios, you're going to have to remember your why to keep pushing you forward.